And welcome, everybody. We're doing another weekly broadcast on Expedition STEM. My name is Andrew.
And I'm Chris, and thanks for joining us for our weekly show. We've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today, but Andrew, I think we have some major news for the life of Expedition STEM. We will be attending Silicon Valley ComicCon next week as media. It's really exciting for me. I know you've been talking about some of the panels. What's really exciting you most about coming to ComicCon?
Probably Back to the Future. I would say Back to the Future. Christopher Lloyd's going to be there, Michael J. Fox, and Leah Thompson, who obviously played Doc, Marty, and Lorraine McFly. So I'm pretty excited to see them. Might get a picture or autograph, something like that. But in general, we're going there as media, so we're going to be interviewing people, seeing what sort of science, technology, engineering, math things are going around there as well. And there's going to be tech there. There's probably going to be some engineering and some science and stuff.
Well, the interesting thing is unlike the other Silicon Valley, unlike the other Comic-Con that happened, whether it be Chicago Comic-Con or the Comic-Con International that happens in San Diego, this one being in Silicon Valley is actually hosted by Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. And his goal was actually to bring together not only the nerd culture that's prevalent within Silicon Valley, but also the tech culture. So this is really a hybrid event. We have panelists from NASA, panelists from major technology companies, people who have been inspired by some of their favorite comic books to go out and actually create the technologies. So he's really kind of fusing the two together, how culture has influenced tech, how tech has influenced culture. It's really becoming a hybrid event. And, one of the things that I'm actually excited about is the Friday night sit down with William Shatner. I know a lot of people, shat on the Shat, but I personally love the fact that he's been so willing for years to not only talk about Star Trek and other adventures and things ventures that he's been a part of, but for him to even talk about inspiration through Star Trek and what that's done for much of the culture here.
Yeah, and I hope to meet William Shatner as well. He retweeted he replied to one of my tweets, just a couple weeks ago, and I got really excited. So I'm in this big William Shatner kick right now. So yeah, I hope to see him too. We'll also be attempting. Or sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you should tweet to him again. Just remind him that we'll have a chance to meet up with him at SVCC.
Yeah. And Chris and I will also be attending a couple other conventions while we're there. One is DroidCon and one is the IoT Summit. What do you think about those, Chris?
I think that it's interesting. There's a lot of opportunities. I actually was able to go to another IoT event that happened here at our office a couple of days ago, where we could see some of the major breakthroughs that are coming out of whether it's the connected home, connected workplace, all the different types of devices, from smart sprinklers to smart showers, new types of lighting and home automation, and things that really even kind of the platform plays that connect them all together. So you can have Alexa or your IFIT commands or your phone or your smart lights or your smart TV all connected together. So it's interesting to see a lot of that coming to life. Even on the DroidCon side, for those who aren't familiar with DroidCon, it's actually a conference of droid developers and application developers who use the Android platform. So hearing some of the tips and tricks that they're coming out with, new applications that might be launching, new ways that they are implementing many of the STEM fields to have Android drive the future of what they're creating today. So it's interesting what we're doing. I think the most interesting one, and that we're keeping our fingers crossed about, is actually the following Monday. Apple is rumored to be announcing the S5e or 5S something, or
5S.
Yeah, so they're smaller 5, as well as the iPad Pro. Knock on wood, we get credentialed and we will be able to go to that event. Nonetheless, you'll likely be hearing about it on our Daily STEM podcast.
Yep. And another thing that'll be coming up soon too, after the dust settles from our excitement in Silicon Valley, I'm going to be joining this group in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where I am right now, called the Fayetteville Makers Club. And basically, it's a group of people who get together and help each other build things. One of the things that they do is an Arduino class. For those of you that may not know what Arduino is, it's basically a microcontroller about the size of a playing card. And you can do all sorts of things with it. You program it like a computer and have this little device do anything from, it could be a remote control car or, something that starts your coffee in the morning. So I'm actually going to be, I think the first project I want to work on is a remote toy for my cats. And then I also want to build a little device that automatically unshuffles a Rubik's Cube. So I've already got the sort of the algorithm down for that, but I just haven't implemented it in the hardware. So hopefully we'll have that sometime in the next couple months, something like that. So
I've never been good at a Rubik's Cube. I can get it to where I've got a cross on every side, but I can't get the corners aligned. That's the last step, and I know it's just a pattern of movements, and I always forget the pattern.
I'll show you next week.
Okay.
All right.
Should we jump into our weekly stories?
Yeah. So the first story we're going to be doing is science. So this week, just a couple or a few days ago, depending on what time zone you're in, we had the only total solar eclipse for 2016. It occurred in like Eastern Asia and then went to part of Hawaii. And so if you didn't know what a solar eclipse was, it's basically when the moon goes between the sun and the earth at a certain point and basically casts a shadow, or what they call the umbra, on the earth. And if you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, the sky goes dark, it looks like nighttime. So it started at 11:19, that is Greenwich time, on March 8th, that's PM. And then it ended at 4:34 a.m. on March 9th, that's Greenwich Mean Time. They call how long it stays dark, they call that totality. The longest that it lasted was 4 minutes and 9 seconds. So in some places of Indonesia, they were able to get black sky for about 4 minutes. There was also what they call a partial eclipse, where if you weren't in the right path, you could, see part of the sun being blocked. So I think the most popular place that there was a partial eclipse was in Hawaii. Most of the path was over the ocean, so not a lot of people got to see it, but yeah. So Chris, have you ever seen a solar eclipse before?
The last one I remember seeing was, I want to say I was in 6th or 7th grade, and I remember actually going out with our little box cameras, and we weren't, the solar eclipse, if you ever have the opportunity to see one, the one thing they say is never look directly at it. The actual strength of the corona is enough to burn the retina and damage your eyes. So you have to look at it usually through reflection, or at least through very, very, very thick glass, something that even sunglasses usually can't provide enough protection. So we actually use cardboard reflectors where you could see the sun came in from one side and the shape of the sun was actually reflected down on the bottom of the cardboard. And that was the one thing or the one way we were able to see it. Now, next year, the path actually travels across the entire U.S. It goes from Oregon all the way across to, I want to say North Carolina it goes all the way through North Carolina, or through the United States, almost diagonally through the United States. If you draw a line from Oregon, or just south of Portland, Oregon, to I think maybe it was South Carolina, and with St. Louis, Missouri right in the middle, it will go straight across that line. So if you're in the middle of the country next year, you'll be able to see it either in total darkness or in partial darkness. And I think the first time in almost a quarter century that we've been able to see it in the U.S. With a complete or total eclipse.
Yeah, so the last total solar eclipse in the U.S., I believe, was in 1978, and the last coast-to-coast total solar eclipse in the United States was in 1918. So it's been a while. The U.S. will, no matter where you are in the U.S., everyone in the U.S. will get a partial solar eclipse. So you at least go outside that day. Hopefully you get to know what time it's happening and see what's going on. Otherwise, if you're sitting in your house and all of a sudden it goes dark, you might freak out. What's going on? But there's some interesting things about solar eclipses. So I think one of the most things that the coolest sort of science that was done during the solar eclipse was helped by my man Einstein over here. So in his general relativity paper, he predicted that mass bends space. So stuff bends space, and that's how gravity works and that sort of thing. So he predicted that if there was a star behind our sun, that we could actually see it if it was at the right point, even though it was behind the sun and you shouldn't be able to see it. It's because the light is coming to the sun, and then because the sun is so dense, it bends around and gets into our field of vision. So it wasn't until it was the next solar eclipse after Einstein's paper when they were able to verify that they saw stars that they shouldn't have been able to see behind the sun. So that's pretty cool. This particular solar eclipse that happened this week, there's a NASA team who did a experiment. They've been working on this for a while, but when the sun goes out, you can basically see the corona, which is the huge sort of like surface or protruding part of the sun. So you can see flares and all sorts of things. So they were studying electron velocity, seeing how fast these electrons are traveling around the sun. They can do a bunch of good with that. You know, it's very important to learn how the sun behaves because it could wipe out our satellites and things like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
One of the fun things that also happened out of this solar eclipse is actually a video that's currently posted on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you do. There is a Alaska Airlines flight, I believe, that was flying to Hawaii or from Hawaii to the mainland that actually took a longer detour to allow some astrophysicists that were on board to take a look at the solar eclipse. And the reaction of these guys is pretty hysterical. Just the amount of excitement that you hear from people who study stars, who study the sun, and what this really meant for them, not only professionally, but as their passion. And to hear that come across on video, not only is it entertaining, just kind of funny things, but it's also kind of inspiring that somebody can have this amount of passion over something like a solar eclipse.
Yeah, in 2009, I went to China for a science conference, but it just happened to coincide, or they planned it to coincide with a solar eclipse that was happening in China. So that was really exciting. Like everyone was getting ready for it. Turns out though that day it was overcast. I think people that were with our group were able to see it. A couple people gotten on the train and they went about 3 hours away, and they were able to see partials through the clouds. It was still really overcast, but it was so amazing having it being like sun, and then like for like 6 minutes it was just dark and you couldn't, it looked like it was nighttime. It was crazy.
Yeah. Was it actually overcast, or was it the smog there in China?
It was actually overcast. It was horrible.
Well, speaking of smog, so our technology story actually takes us to Tesla and clean air and clean energy, but in a different kind of path than you might think. Joe Nguyen, who's actually a citizen of Singapore, bought a brand new Tesla Model S in Hong Kong this week with the anticipation of being able to benefit from $11,000 in tax credits when he imported it in from Hong Kong. However, when he got the car in Hong Kong, he was also slapped with an $11,000 fine. And that's because Teslas, the Model S, even though they've never been tested by the Singaporean government, are actually classified in the same class as some of the largest polluters in luxury cars in the world. So despite being an electric car that has zero emissions, it was classified as a giant polluter. Now, this is actually justified according to the Singaporean government because of the amount of CO2 emissions that it takes to charge the car, or the energy to produce the energy to charge the car. Andrew, my question to you is that fair that we have to be charged for energy production, not just energy consumption?
Yes. Now, I can understand where, that car takes energy to be charged. So, there might be, depending on how they're producing that energy, they might be using coal or whatever. So in that sense, like, it's still sort of, it's not totally, not polluting the environment. But on the other hand, let's say you were to get your energy from another source. Like, for instance, my uncle, he has solar panels on his house, and it basically powers his whole house. And he has a plug-in Prius and charges his Prius that way. So, if the same thing were to happen to him, because I'm pretty sure that the Singapore government is not, saying that, they're just taxing the car. They probably don't know how much energy he's actually using, right?
Right. Well, that's one thing that they said is they know that it uses up to 444 kilowatts per hour. And the amount of energy, they know from the manufacturer specifications, how much energy it takes to charge the battery. But what they're also saying is the amount of CO2 emissions. Singapore is a coal-based country in terms of their infrastructure, the power infrastructure. So as a place for wanting to have clean energy, they don't have many renewable sources. They don't have nuclear power either, which means that you have to burn more coal to produce more electricity to power the vehicle, and that's their source. Now, the one caveat of this is Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, has even called the prime minister of Singapore, trying to figure out whether there is a way for the government to protect new Tesla owners, and also help clean the environment there in Singapore without having these tax restrictions because of the zero emissions versus the emissions that come out of the energy production process.
Yeah, if it sounds like this guy probably needs to invest in some solar. If he can afford a Tesla, he could probably afford some solar panels and a wind generator. That might be one way to sort of get around the government's restriction if he produces his own renewable energy.
Yeah. Well, storing and with the Tesla Powerwall as well. I mean, you now have enough power that you can generate and store on the side of the house, generate throughout the day, so you're not consuming. And then at the point that you need to recharge your vehicle, you just plug it in and charge from the Powerwall. So knock on wood, there's going to be more opportunities for people in developing nations that don't have the renewable sources to still take advantage of some of the tax breaks without necessarily worrying about getting charged for energy production costs.
Yeah, I can't wait the day until I can afford, or it becomes affordable for the Tesla power wall and solar panels. I can't wait to do all that stuff. I already have a Prius, so I'm kind of like a little bit there, but yeah, I would love to go all tech and just kind of leave the lowest footprint possible.
Yeah. Well, I think that takes us to our next story, or we should at least roll on to it.
Yeah, I get it. Good pun. From one car to the next. So what's our next story? Something about engineering?
Oh, kind of engineering. This past week, we heard news about Goodyear rolling out new tires, or at least unveiling at I believe it was the Berlin Car Show, a set of new tires that are completely spherical. The tires are actually designed, they're 3D printed, and they're designed after with the tread that takes the form of coral, because then that works better with hydroplaning and multi-directional travel. But it will also work with maglev suspension. It's full of sensors to detect wet conditions, dry conditions, which way you're turning, road temperature, tire temperature, and all sorts of other things. Are we at the point? Oh, well, and the last part of this is that it's actually designed for autonomous cars. If you haven't seen the tires yet, they kind of look like the wheels that you would have found on a Will Smith's car in the movie I, Robot. They're big, giant spheres that protrude out from the side of the car. Are we at the point now where autonomous cars are going to have better performance than we will?
Of course. There's a lot of human factors involved in driving, and a lot of people are against autonomous cars. I'm definitely for them. I think we definitely need to err on the side of caution for a lot of these things. But but I think eventually we'll get it down, just like how other things in our life were taken over sort of by technology. And yeah, the spherical wheels, like I really dug it. If you haven't seen the video yet, go on YouTube and type in like Google 360 spherical tires or something like that. You'll be able to see the video.
It's the Goodyear Eagle 360 tire.
Okay. And one interesting thing about it is, since it's a sphere, it could technically roll at any sort of like angle. But what the video shows is that all 4 tires will be lined up in a certain way, and they'll all kind of roll in that same direction. Whatever direction it's moving. If it's moving forward, they'll all go like that. But one problem that they address is when you get wear on your tires. So after a while, your tires wear out, and usually if you just have tires like everyone does these days, you got to rotate your tires usually every time you get a tire change so that you don't wear them out too quickly. Since they're spherical tires and they can rotate however they want, if it became worn going this way, then they'll just kind of rotate it a little bit, like maybe 90 degrees even, and then start driving forward with it that way. So not only are these tires revolutionary, but they're going to save you from changing your tires all the time. One of the other cool things I really liked about it is, since they're spheres, they're not just limited to moving forwards and backwards. They can move side to side. So parking is going to be so much easier because you can slip in and slip out of these tight spaces. If you can just sort of have your car go like this and then park into a spot. So yeah, I can't wait. I wish I was born 300 years from now.
Well, I think the parking is going to be interesting. I think they may also be interesting for mass transit. If you consider a lot of the buses today that actually have rear articulating wheels, which means that instead of both wheels going forwards, as they turn, they'll pivot out, similar to a hook and ladder truck for the fire department, where the rear wheel, the driver actually turns in an opposite direction in order to get the back of the truck to swing around a corner. Many of the buses today, especially here in Silicon Valley, that we have Google and Apple and all of these major tech companies that have shuttle buses, people going up and down from Silicon Valley up to San Francisco and the other directions as well. And many of those buses have those articulating wheels, which is actually why, going back to our autonomous cars, which is actually why the recent Google car was involved in a crash, was because it saw the rear articulating wheel and which was going in an opposite direction, and moved accordingly, but didn't realize that it didn't know how to deal with articulating wheels instead of wheels that were just facing forward. So it made it panic. So I think there's a round wheel where you can't cause a vertical line of sight panic attack for an autonomous car will actually help keep people safer. On top of which, Goodyear says that these tires will stop faster, they'll run smoother, and it'll be a lot easier for people to have greater peace of mind when it comes to driving on the road, or riding in an autonomous car, riding in a driverless car, because of those factors. So it's interesting to see how they're tackling the market, and I guess how we're rolling down the road towards the future of a driverless highway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they, because as Chris mentioned, they're marketing it as like magnetic levitation. So how do you start the wheel, and how do you stop it, and how do you turn it? Like that's interesting.
You consider some of the monorails that are used today, and even though many of those are on a track, or metro systems that that are on the East Coast, many of them use magnetic suspension, magnetic braking for forward and backwards motions. Weaponry like rail guns are magnetic based. There are a lot of magnetic based propulsion systems, safety systems, mechanisms, brakes that happen at the push of a button. So being able to stop on a dime may actually be easier with a rolling on a marble than it is rolling on a donut.
And you will never have to replace your brake pads, and you won't hear the screech as like, you know, they're wearing out.
Yeah. Well, you just have to make sure that you have the solenoids or the magnets that you have built into the suspension have enough power to them. So you can't run out of energy on those things. Keep your batteries charged.
All right. Next, we're going to move on to our math topic for the week. This one is kind of interesting. It's basically how many times does it take to shuffle a deck so that you know, basically how many times you have to shuffle a deck before it's good enough to start playing cards. So this was actually posted online by a gentleman by the name of Cleve Moeller. And basically what he stated is, you know, when you get a deck of cards, so I got a deck of cards here, just so happened that they were brand new, so it's kind of a good point. When they come, you got the ace of spades, and then each card beneath it is one of the same suit, and then it gets into the other suits. So when you get a deck of cards, they're not shuffled, obviously, but how many times, you know, if you're to take a perfect deck, do you have to shuffle? There's a couple interesting things. So there's one term called a perfect shuffle. A perfect shuffle is when you split the deck in two and you go card by card, shuffling that way. That's called a perfect shuffle. There's actually two variants of the perfect shuffle, and it basically just refers to which card do you start with. Do you start with this one or this one, and then which one's on top? So there's those two variants. It's called an in pharaoh and an out pharaoh. And the interesting thing about an out pharaoh is that once you start doing the perfect shuffle, it only takes 8 shuffles in order for you to get back to the order that you started with. So if you did 8 perfect shuffles, you would get back to this. If you do the in pharaoh, it takes 52 perfect shuffles in order to get back to the very beginning. So, you know, it's kind of tricky that, you know, and if I think once you're like a couple shuffles in on the out pharaoh, you can get like all the aces lined up. So, you know, if you're like a magician or, you know, someone who's trying to cheat at cards, you could shuffle the deck knowing where these cards are going to lie, and then you could deal them however. So there's no good way to, if you're doing a perfect shuffle straight out of the box, you will never get a good random thing. So it actually turns out you need to introduce a randomness into your shuffling, and that's called a riffle shuffle, where you're not doing it card by card. You're just, you know, maybe you got the decks uneven, or you do 2 and then 1, that sort of thing. So this guy used a math program called MATLAB and found out that it takes about 7 riffle shuffles in order to get the best sort of randomized order. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Chris, do you play cards?
I've been a poker player for quite a long time, and a blackjack player whenever I go to Vegas. What I found interesting about the article was, regardless of how the shuffle was done, it still doesn't do anything for the odds of what's going to come next based upon if you doing the mathematical values of what's been dealt and what's possible remaining for poker hands or even blackjack hands. So if you're a card or somebody who is really good at probabilities of making your hand where you've got a jack and an 8 and you need to make a straight, it really didn't matter which or how many times the cards were shuffled or which order the cards came out with in order for you to chase a certain hand or have a probability of a winning hand. What changed it most was actual number of seats that are dealt even with a clean deck of cards. So if you have 6 people at a table versus 3 people at a table, how many cards that are coming out actually maximizes or how many cards that are coming out definitely changes the possibility of winning your hand.
Yeah, and that's why whenever I'm in a casino and I sit down at a table, I'm like, I hope I don't screw up anybody's, like, you know, rhythm or anything like that. Because, you know, if you sit down and then like you know, if one person starts doing really bad, then I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll put the links below for this guy's study when he was doing the shuffling things. You'll get to see how, you know, it obviously you could just, you know, sort of say, oh, just shuffle them or whatever. But, you know, mathematically, how do you know when this happens? So you can actually see he's got graphs and equations and algorithms and that sort of thing. And you'll be able to see why he chose the number 7 as the least amount of shuffles it would take.
Excellent. Well, I think that about does it for our show topics. Anything else on your side, Andrew? I know we're excited about next week.
Yeah, I really hope we get into Apple. We might be able to stop by Google or Facebook if Chris can get the hookup. So
already got the hookup, so we're definitely guaranteed to hit both of those.
All right, cool. Hopefully we're allowed to like take a picture or ask some questions and let the audience know what's kind of going on there. So
yeah, and everybody. I was going to say, everybody else also check into the blog and go to the Silicon Valley ComicCon agenda. If there are things that you want us to check out, put it in the comments here. Send us an email, Andrew or Chris at expeditionstem.com. We'll be happy to check out some of those sessions. Also, next week's show, we will be recording live from Comic-Con. If we have a good enough internet connection, we'll do the Google Hangout here, so it'll be posted right away. If not, we'll have to post it a little bit afterwards. But still, we will have our again our weekly live show. So we'll be back again next week.
Yeah, and just to build on what Chris just said, if you have any questions for specific celebrities, maybe we can ask them that as well. Hopefully, we'll be able to sort of like go backstage or to like a special media place where we can get sort of like a one-on-one sort of question and answer.
I'm excited to possibly see Steve Wozniak. So he's been a man who's influenced so many different technologies. As much as I am an anti-Apple user, I am very much a fan of his. I met him a couple of times for clients that I used to work on that he was one of the investors and the chief science officer at. But it's always interesting to hear him talk about things other than what he's working on, but just really hearing him talk about his passion. If you haven't seen him last week on Conan, check out that interview. It was really fun.
I gotta check that out.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in. That's the end of our episode this week. Tune in next time. Again, you'll find us at expeditionstem.com. Subscribe to our daily expedition or our daily STEM podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Stitcher, or at our website, expeditionstem.com. Thanks again for tuning in.
Take care, everybody.